உங்கள் பிள்ளைகள் 10th மற்றும் +2 CBSE ஸ்டேட் போர்டில் படிக்கிறார்களா? அவர்களை அதிக மார்க் வாங்க வைக்க ஈஸி வழி. Chanakyaa International Academy online coaching center for all subjects. Contact 7823910123.
Why is modern economics in such a mess?
That's a very pertinent question, but the answer is the fact of the matter is the economics world around is in a mess. We are seeing this. Countries after countries are having its economics more like Ukraine than what it is painted out to be. We are having debt. Global debt has crossed $325 trillion. The GDP of the world is around 85, stagnating. We are accumulating more debts. We don't know how to come out of it. But this is factual. But if you do a clinical analysis, economics as a discipline addresses the indisciplined. It is no longer a discipline of economics, it's the indiscipline of economics. It celebrates the indiscipline, it addresses the indiscipline, it talks about the indiscipline. So somewhere down the line, we have to shift the focus back to the discipline. And when we talk about the discipline, we talk about civilization. So there is a civilization cultural miss, or the missing middle I call it, in the discipline of economics. See, H2 plus O2 is 2H2O, whether you make it in America or in Australia. But you give a 100 rupee note to an American, he spends 107. You give 100 rupee note to an Indian, he spends 70. You give a 100 rupee note to a Chinese, he spends 55. So there is a cultural bias on which the entire subset of economic works. Economics is like a topping in a pizza. But the crust is your culture, crust is your civilization focus. Take away that civilization, take away the culture, and you treat all of them as equals, you find that it's difficult to homogenize the subject called economics. And that is what the West has done. The West has homogenized the economics the way they look at economics. I'm not here to say that's good, bad, ugly. I'm only saying that economics as a discipline more or less suits the West. That's why when you asked Ratanji a pertinent question this afternoon about
I was just coming to that.
About the RSS view about economics, I would say it is still in an embryonic stage. RSS would love to have a view, but there is always a difficulty in a country as complex and diverse, and on a topic as diverse and as difficult as economics, to actually put out a product that will appeal to everybody. So you would be somebody who would say privatize everything, and fairly so. You mean in all good intention, but there are people who believe that you allow privatization, rampant privatization, that cannot run in a country like this. You cannot privatize railways. You can do some parts of it, but you cannot. I think this must be the railway union interrupting me. So the point is very clear that there is an economic necessity and there is a practical possibility. We have to marry these two in our system, and I'm sure in the next 25 years we should do it. That is how we will actually this what is this Amrit Utsav and other things that we are talking about. The next 25 years that the Prime Minister promises in the run up to the centenary celebrations of the independence will be focusing more on the economic side, for which we frankly said we don't have a model. The hard disk is empty.
So, can you check if that's working again? Or
no, I'll have to find out.
Is that, yeah, could be.
Yeah, you carry it.
Yeah, so but as a scientist, your explanation, Anna, is very troubling for me, because as I said, I don't hate the gray. I'm not a fan of the gray. I'm a fan of the black and white. And I truly believe that if you prove or if you show or conduct an experiment successfully in the lab, you should be able to reproduce it on any scale. So here is the question for you. Do you believe in extrapolation? Do you believe in reproduction of an experiment at a scale which is a much larger scale than what happens in the laboratory if it succeeds?
So
essentially, what you're saying is that when you said, look, yes, Anand, you believe in privatization. On the whole, it's a good thing. But in a country like India, it doesn't work. So essentially, what you're saying is I can't extrapolate it. I can't reproduce it on a scale that I desire. So my question is, why?
because we tried two grand experiments in the last 70 years. One was socialism, one was globalization. We didn't know whether the globalization had ZATION or SATION. And we fell through and we could not actually find out what was this. And both of this has been given a silent, decent burial.
Globalization has
Yes.
been given a burial?
Now, no world leader talks about globalization, and none of us. India was the last set of leaders. The Congress Party was the long, set of leaders from the Congress Party India who were talking about globalization, and they also do not talk about globalization. When did Modi talk about globalization?
Well, they might not talk about it, but the fact is we are so deeply entrenched in it that our imports from China this year were the highest ever, $120 billion.
100.
So we are $100 billion. So we are totally entrenched in a globalized economy.
Trade is not globalization.
Culture is.
No. Globalization has several parts, of which trade is one part. Now, a country like India cannot isolate itself and become a North Korea. We can't shut our borders. We can't say that we will not buy anything from the world, or we will not export anything to the world. You know, a jetliner falls somewhere in the remote Pacific, you will find 10 Indians there. You know, that's the power of, we are 1/6 of humanity. So you don't have to feel squeamish about it. We'll have to deal with the world. We'll have to engage with the world. But that is not globalization. What is globalization in my view? See, there are systems, there are practices, there are controlling factors which determine globalization. Now, let us take the dollar. Now, many of us here would believe that the Ukraine war is for a piece of land or to control Ukraine. And I am one of those who believe it is not. It is for challenging the hegemony of the dollar. Now, dollar, why has it become the dominant currency of the world? Well, are you going to give badam halwa to me for that?
I was just eating it.
Okay, you can. Okay. Now, the point is that the dollar has become the global currency for a variety of historical reasons. We have also accepted it. And when we trade with China, we don't determine the trade in yuan or in rupees. We said, you said it, it's $100 billion of imports from China. You never said 7.5 trillion yuan or rupees. The fact is that we have, as a country, we have seen that is failing. Historically, the trade with so many countries is failing. SWIFT has failed now. SWIFT, which was supposed to be the best of systems, which held on since 1945, has collapsed last week. Now, where is globalization in all these things? You can still say theoretically globalization works. Now, come to socialism. Socialism was an experiment, and I would urge you to let us focus on socialism more in the remaining part of the conversation. Socialism was basically an import. It was never an Indian concept. That I will have to be supinely indifferent to myself and the state will take care of me. That is the idea of socialism. It has failed world over, and probably it is in some part of the world, it's still in some success. But India has never accepted socialism, and India has given it a silent burial. That was what the new economic policy, that was what supposed to be the new economic policy of 91. You may say that it still exists in the preamble of the Constitution.
It exists to such an extent that it is debilitating for India.
I agree with you, Anand. The fact of the matter, it exists in the political parties. I'm talking about the society, which is different from the state.
It totally exists in society to such an extent, Anna, that you are saying that we cannot have privatization in the railways. You yourself are accepting.
Anand, that doesn't make us a socialist state. Please understand. That is a state which runs the railways because of a variety of what shall I say, managerial reason. Supposing I help you and give you a blood, God forbid, 300 ml of blood, if you meet with an accident, doesn't make you survive on my blood eternally. That is a managerial issue, that we don't have the managerial bandwidth in a private sector company to maintain Indian Railways. Simple. It's such a humongous organization. It's too big that we cannot privatize it. It is not so easy, sir. It is not so easy that you break Indian Railways and privatize it. It all can be said in a closed environment. Very difficult. Even to privatize Air India, let us come to the easier part. It has taken 8 long years.
Yeah, but that's not an issue which is ideological. That issue is because we had politicians who were so scared, and unions who were overbearing. It's not a question that it has taken 10 years for us to privatize because there was something wrong or we were figuring out what is right or wrong in privatization. It is simple fact that people had cold feet. Politicians did not have the guts to go on with it.
Partially, politics plays a very important role in economics. I agree with you. And you and I are people who don't have to really worry about election. But 6 months down the line, the priority of this government will be to win Gujarat elections. So politics or economics be damned, we will have to look at it. And the mandate of a political party is to win elections. Let us be very clear. There is no goody-goody things, or people are not going to say that, look, you have done your economic policies well, but you have failed at the ballots. So people are not going to accept it. So understand one thing, that there are vested interests, and vested interests have developed in the last 70 years. But what I'm talking about is to step back from looking at it, what should be the state policy, to what is traditionally the Indian policy. The Indian policy, the traditional economic policy, which is what I was alluding to, has been to be self-dependent and self-sufficient. I don't use such bombastic names, but we would like to be a society which would depend on itself. Okay, self-contained, self-sufficient. In that, trade may be important. In that, I don't want anything but a piece of loincloth is what I may require. Those things are left to the individual. But as a society, we were more conscious about placing the individual at the center of economic policies, and states used to make their policies at a residual level. A residuary state. What happened, I tell you. I think there was some speaker, I forgot who it was, alluded to about article, I think Maniji's talk about 1935 Government of India Act. He also talked about how the constitution was framed under the overarching guidance of the 1935 Government of India Act. Now, if you read the Government of India Act, you read Part 7 of Schedule 7, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3 of the Constitution, you find the state can come into your bedroom. It comes in marriages, it comes in divorces, if you have children, Guardianship Act, every damn thing the state is there. If you want to educate your child, right to education. Now the state has taken an omnipotent, omnipresent position, dominant position. This was acceptable to government of Britain to rule us. But this is not a classical Indian position of the state. Where Article 12 has to be rewritten as to what is the duties of the state, what is the rights of the state.
So there you have to specify what was and what wasn't written as an Indian concept, and how long you are talking about. Because if we go back to, for example, the Upanishads, or say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is a family, and the fact that Indians have always excelled in trading globally. In fact, some of the people have discovered lands because they wanted to trade with India and wanted to find where India is, and the other way around. If you look at the migration, the gaining theory of out of India concept, if you go to Iran, and so the fact is we've always traded with the world. We've always believed, or the Indian way, the Hindu way has believed that the world is a family. Let us interact with. The more we interact with it, the more powerful we become. Is that not at variance with what you were saying as to how right now we somehow have suddenly shunned that concept?
Now, let me tell you about the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. First, always there is a contrarian position in the Indian classical texts. the one of the as you say, I did an analysis where from this comes, and it comes, I'm told, from the Maha Upanishad.
Yes, yes.
And there, a jackal seems
The
to
two stories. So it also is in Panchatantra, but it also is in Maha
Maha Upanishad. The Maha Upanishad story is that the jackal calls the goat to have, come to this side of the stream because the grass is green, and says, come, let us have it. The crow wants it and says, don't come. This fellow is calling you to kill you. And then the jackal says, come this side. We are all one. We are all Vasudeva Kudumbakam. So there is always, that's the story. But the point I'm trying to say is, we never feared trade. We never feared to interact with the world. We never feared to have a dialogue with the world. Best of our philosophers have dialogue, sometimes one, sometimes step back. But as I said, we were never a closed or an iron curtain clad society. But at the same time, we retained our independence and our position in whatever we did. We never allowed ourselves to be swept off the feet. Now, the classical Indian position as to whether railways to be owned by the government or railways to be owned by the private was never cast in stone also. Let us be clear about it. It shifted back and forth as to what should be the role of the state. The state was like an emergency lamp in the classical Indian position. This lamp goes in, the emergency lamp comes in automatically and quickly. It never waited. So I would like to go back to that state without defining the duties in A, B, C, D in one schedule. If you read part 1, part 2, part 3 of schedule 7, you are horrified that what type of draconian laws were being thought about by the British to intrude into your privacy. It is a question of Swadeshi means Swadeshi or Swadharma or independence doesn't mean at the state level or a political level. It talks about you as an individual to be liberated from the states, the clutches of the state. That is what we are lacking today.
But then here is the question. When you, who is very liberal minded when it comes to economy and finance and general, your place in the society, knowing you, and when it especially comes to economic matters, you talk of individual rights, you are, a capitalist by nature. You don't like socialism. But a person of your eminence is saying that when it comes to privatizing railways, India might have to think differently. It's not all that cut and dry. That is what you said. I mean, that was the import of your
Yes, absolutely.
So where does the buck stop with you? Next, you will say, when it comes to privatizing the banks that incidentally were privatized and we nationalized it, where do you end? Where do you stop? Because you might say, look, nationalization of banks was also important because private banks might not reach that village which is 10,000 kilometers. You will always find an explanation or an excuse for socialism. This is the tragedy of socialism.
I think the Badam Alwa seems to have done wonders for you. You asked a very good question. Now, I will answer this. You have one more bit of Badam Alwa. Now, answer to this is very clear, Anand, that there is again no hard and fast rule. Like the gentleman there said that we should privatize railways, and what you are batting for, I agree with you that this is what is lacking in us today. Has to have a very clear economic goal. We are looking at our century-year-old problems with 2-year term officials with 1-year budgets. This is not my words, it is the words of Nani Palkiwala. So the fact of the matter is we have certain issues that are there for centuries. Now you cannot, by using this idea of Vikas alone, Vikas is very much required. That's why the Prime Minister has now added Sabka Prayas. Now, if you notice it, that the Prime Minister has shifted it also to make it all inclusive, and he says Sabka Prayas. When I say Sabka Prayas, it includes everybody in the national progress and national development. And in that, individual liberty, individual rights are very important. And the state has to play a secondary role. When the state starts playing a secondary role, the individual perforce will take a very predominant role in terms of managing his economics, managing his development. That we have still not trusted the individual.
So here let me trap him completely, hook, line and sinker, because Ratan, my good friend, has just tweeted that he escaped very nicely from my clutches and I tried to trap him and all that. All very good. I have read your book. I have admired your book. my next question, when you just now finished by saying that, look, the state is going to give individual back its rights, sabka prayas hoga. What you meant was it will be an
I
inclusive
quoted the
thing.
Prime Minister, no less.
You don't believe that?
I believe him.
Okay, right. I won't ask on how many other matters you believe in, but that's a separate matter. So here is the real dichotomy which I have gleaned from your book, and here is the question. You believe and you say that a welfare state can no longer alleviate poverty.
Yes.
How will an individual alleviate poverty? How will an individual finance going to his daughter or son to a school or to a hospital or to so many other measures, Ujjwala, whatever, without the state coming in? Isn't there a dichotomy between individualism and the role of the state, as you've put it? Do I need another badam halwa?
Yes, you require tons of it. Okay. Now, as far as I am concerned, a welfare state has to be distinguished from a state which indulges in the welfare of the people. There are two different things. When you start saying that I will provide you Ujjwala, then you say right to education, I will interfere. Then I will do help you with Narega, Manrega, whatever it is. What you are not understanding is economics is not a subject without an effect. Every cause will have an effect. Every effect can be traced to a cause. What you are doing, you are expanding the role of the state and you are indulging in a massive collection exercise of taxes. And from whom do you collect taxes? You are collecting taxes from the most honest individual people who are taking care of themselves without the benefit of the state, without the help of the state. And you are sucking out money from the hands of those who are taking care of themselves, who are disciplined, who are managing their affairs and giving it to those who need it. I understand. But in the process, you are also giving to those who are not requiring it merely because there is a devil called democracy for which you want to leverage it on.
So are you against the Nordic system, which is welfare state?
See, again,
high taxes and welfare state.
See, Nordic system will work in Sweden and in
this is what I don't like. It's a successful experiment.
No. You
are against
let us make it.
Extrapolating it
now
or expanding it.
Now you can have that system in. That's why I said we draw on globalization, but we also stop at it because there are certain things which we cannot directly import and say that this is what will suit India best. You for all that you know, yes, Anand, who am I to say that it won't look good or it will look good? Who am I? If let us assume that for the sake of argument, let us say I agree with you, Anand. Is it that the view of the entire set of the population here, much less outside, that we should follow the Nordic system? The fact of the matter is we don't have a serious debate on economic policies. That is the crux of the issue. What we are having is that we are doing ad hocism. And in ad hocism, we look at elections. And in this election, democracy and populism. See, welfare state has degenerated into a populist state, from a populist state to a reckless state. And that is what worries me. And we have to draw a very clear list that the state will do this much and nothing more than this. And whatever it does beyond this will be only in emergencies. It cannot be that, as one sitting judge of a high court said, even if a man were to be in his house supinely indifferent to his own needs, it is the duty of the state to feed him three times a day. That is ridiculous. We cannot have that type of system. What it means is it creates a burden on you and me to feed the third man.
So can I put forward my argument and then
please
destroy it? You're free to destroy it. I believe in the welfare state, though I am absolutely, and I am also from JNU, but I am not a communist. I am not a socialist.
Why do you say that every 5 minutes?
Just to reassure the public.
Okay.
So I believe that socialism can only work in a capitalist state. So I believe welfare state is a must, but in order for you to give money for that welfare or to provide money, you have to earn it through capitalism, capitalist mean, and that essentially is the Nordic system. Now, why do I say that I want a welfare state? Because it, and companies have realized it, that there is, people mistake capitalism as crony capitalism. No, there is nothing crony about capitalism. What is bad is crony capitalism. Capitalism isn't bad. If you look at the last 200, 300, 400 years, what has elevated or really removed real poverty from the world is actually capitalism. So what I want to say is that in a capitalist society, it pays for you in the long run or even in the short run to have a healthy workforce, to have an educated workforce, to have a workforce that can be very flexible so that if you lose a job in one, it's able to shift jobs. And how do you make people healthy, more flexible in an economy, more educated? Through welfare system. So it is a cycle that is sure to reap benefits for the nation. What do you find wrong in that when you say that welfare state is incompetent to elevate poverty in India? What else system do you foresee then?
Well, one is a factual thing, one is a prospective one. Now, the factual thing is India as a living example, socialism has failed. Otherwise, you wouldn't have poverty. If 70 years of your socialism, plus the rate of taxes which were probably as high as 88% plus wealth tax which touched almost close to 100, did not elevate your poverty. So you have to understand we are a living example. And from Roman Empire, you take history, you find no socialist society or a nation succeeding for probably it may for a fleeting moment in history as you look back, 30, 40, 50 years it runs. But it never sustains itself over a longer period of time that you are a socialist nation or a socialist society or a socialist country and yet run for an elongated period of time. It collapses by the weight of its own contradictions. Now, what I find the problem is exorbitant, excessive, corrosive taxation system that inevitably takes over in any socialist society, intermediated by, as Manisa would say, a very incompetent and a very corrosive bureaucratic lobby. Now take Tamil Nadu for instance, or my neighboring state, Kerala. What is the main model of revenue? Forget that it collects large part of revenue from liquor. But the GST collection from the state would probably be going to pay the salaries of the bureaucracy. Please understand this. It's a very important thing that fact that I'm telling you. That the total collection of SGST in the state goes on to pay salaries and pension of the 1%, 1.5% class out of 100% population. And that is what is happening in Tamil Nadu. You add interest, you add state administration, you are done with 80% of the state revenue going on to fund 3 heads. Now, what do you have as development? What do you do out of for development of roads, railways, anything that that the state wants to do? Unfortunately, it is not doing anything. It is left to the center to actually develop any part of infrastructure for long-term needs. Even schools, for instance, it is by and large that it is getting privatized. Education is getting privatized for a simple reason: we don't get good education from government schools. Now, in Nordic society, it would be blasphemy if the cabinet secretary were to send his son to a private school. First, he can't afford it. Second thing, if he does, it would be blasphemy. In this country, private school is the destination of every single mother. Now, you don't require any money to change this. Probably a fiat by the government of India to say every babu who draws money from the Consolidated Fund of India or from the state exchequer will have to send his children up to 10th standard to government schools. This would change the manner in which, you don't have to worry about economic education policy. You don't have to worry whether there is teaching in Tamil or in Bengali or in English, whether calculus has to be introduced in 8th standard or 12th standard. Everything will be settled. I have gone to government schools. I have seen with my own naked eyes that the toilet doors don't exist in girls' schools. And you talk about women education, 80% literacy. How would you get it for women here when the school toilet is dysfunctional? And imagine for a moment, the education secretary's daughter is in that school. That school would have everything done pronto. So this is the type of socialism, the participative socialism. We are talking about socialism only for a theoretical purpose. We are so happy that the state is there. We are so happy that the state government or the central government will take care of it. But in reality, things are not working.
So let me trap you again, because
Don ko pakadna mushkil.